Well, news is official. Kawasaki has announced that 2018 will be the final model year for the KLR 650. The bike has had a hell of a run, debuting in 1987 and really only undergoing one major design change, which happened, I believe, in 2008. The bike has been a mainstay of dual sport forums and really pioneered a lot of what became the adventure riding scene. Of course, the BMW GS is the most famous of all adventure bikes, but long before the GS was out there, underneath people like Ewan McGregor, you had people touring the world on KLR 650s. I always liked the bike. I never had one. I always had old Triumphs, and I've always wanted one because I'm a big guy, I'm tall, and the KLR just always seemed like it would be the perfect fit for me. And earlier this year I was able to get a good deal on one, so I finally pulled the trigger, and I haven't been disappointed. I've been so happy with the bike. That said, I understand, it's the end of an era for the KLR, but that doesn't mean that Kawasaki is bowing out of the dual sport market, or that they're bowing out of the adventure market. They will be announcing some new models very soon. I think sometime this fall or maybe winter. I would have to assume that they wouldn't discontinue the KLR 650 unless they had something in mind to fill that role in their lineup. So right now they have the Versys 300 and they have the Versys 650, which they sort of consider a dual-purpose bike, but both of those bikes are clearly oriented more for sport touring as opposed to adventure touring. With the Versys 300, at least it does have a spoked wheel. It has a 19-inch front. It's capable off-road, but not super capable. With the Versys 650, it's much more of a street bike. It has cast wheels, definitely no big front wheel, no spokes. But those bikes both have something that the KLR doesn't have. Well, they have a lot of things the KLR doesn't have, but most notably they have fuel injection, and both of the 300 and the 650 Versys are available with ABS. In today's world, with all the adventure craze and everybody is releasing stuff like the Super Tenere and the Africa Twin and all these different bikes, the days are numbered for bikes to be able to compete with carburation and to be able to compete with non-ABS setups. With all that said, I think if I had to predict, and I talked about this a little bit on Reddit, but if I was predicting what Kawasaki has up its sleeve, a couple things come to mind, three things really, and it could be one or more of these things, and it could be none of these things, obviously. I could see them releasing something along the lines of the new Royal Enfield Himalayan, which is a 400 as opposed to a 650. I'm not saying that it would look like that, I'm not saying it would behave like that, but I just mean like it would fit in that sort of, that little slot where it's not a full-on big bore bike, but it's small. I think if they went down from the 650 to a 400, they could probably shave some weight, which is one of the biggest gripes that people have against the KLR. And I think that they could redesign the bike to be somewhat similar looking to the KLR, but again, saving weight and maybe adding I guess they could add fuel injection and maybe not ABS, and have something that's a little more feasible for everyone. I don't know. I think that is probably the least likely possibility of the three things I'm going to mention. Probably the most likely thing that I'm going to mention here is that I could see them doing a more off-road oriented version of the Versys 300. Right now, they have something good to start with. They have spoked wheels, they have a 19-inch front wheel, but the bike is it's geared too high. It's geared for the road. I think if they maybe went down a sprocket in the front or up a couple teeth in the rear, that would probably get it geared more toward what a dual sport rider would be comfortable with and what a dual sport rider would be expecting. Something to give it a little more pep in the low end. I think obviously gearing it down just slightly would probably work wonders for making the bike a little bit more user-friendly off-road. One of the huge things about the KLR that everyone loves is that you don't really have to feather the clutch that much. If you're in first gear, it's geared so low that you can pretty much just putt around and not stall the bike and everything. So I think that if you're going to try to replicate a little bit of what people loved about the KLR, you're going to have to gear it down. I think the Versys has obviously way less power than the KLR, but I think it's still a capable motorcycle if it's geared the right way, and I think people could really get a lot out of that bike as a dual sport if it was set up a little better. You'd want to put a high front fender on it, something more like a KLR fender or a KLX fender as opposed to the street fender that's on it now, and get it way up higher off the wheel. Also, you could throw a skid plate on it, and just by doing those couple of things, I think you'd have a much more capable dual sport and something that people could really get into as a first bike. The other idea that I had, the third guess, I guess you would say, would be to do a similar retooling of the Versys 650. That, like I said, that is clearly more of a street bike than the Versys 300. It doesn't have spoked wheels. It's got the small front wheel. It's purely street. I mean, it looks very street. It's not set up for the dirt at all. But again, I think if you put some bigger wheels on it, put some spoked wheels, with the 650 Versys, you could probably go with maybe the same size that you have on the KLR. So you can go with that 17 in the back, 21 in the front, get that big 21-inch front tire on there, and similar to what I said with the Versys 300, you got to get the front fender, you got to get a wider plastic front fender, get it up off the wheel, up toward the steering column. That would change a lot of the look of that bike already. And then, throw a skid plate on the bottom. With those couple mods, I mean, you've got a fuel-injected bike with ABS, you've got, just some other goodies. I mean, the display on it's nicer. It's going to be a lot better right out of the box. And then, if you throw some engine guards on there, or crash guards, put some hand guards on it. I mean, there's a handful of things that you could do that people typically would have done anyways with a DR or a KLR or something. You'd have a bike that's pretty cool. And, the Versys is a little bit heavier than the KLR, but I think people might be okay with it because it's gonna fit more cleanly into that slot that like the V-Strom takes up now. People are okay with the V-Strom being heavier because it's fuel injected and because it's got such good manners on the road and stuff like that. If you take a Versys 650 and you just do a few little things, I think it could be really capable off-road. And if they did the 300 and the 650 and just made like an adventure version of both of them, or I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, I really can see them making a Versys 650 adventure. I think that you really could get a lot of that KLR market with one or both of those bikes. Obviously, if you choose to do the 300, then yeah, you might snag that early adopter or whatever of motorcycles, but you're not going to have anything for them to graduate to. And I would say the KLR is probably a really popular second motorcycle. I think that a lot of brand new riders might find the KLR to be a bit of a difficult beast to tame, just because of how tall it is and how heavy it is and everything. But for someone who's already comfortable riding a bike, I think the KLR is a great second bike, and because it's cheap, it's not going to break the bank for you to step up from a smaller bike. But you're not going to be able to achieve that with a 300. If you've been riding a KLX 250 and you're ready for something more, the odds of you spending the money to step up from a 250 to a 300 is pretty slim. I would recommend that they do a 300 and a 650. That way you have the best of both worlds. You can try to grab that initial market. You can try to grab those young riders, those new riders, and get them excited about motorcycling, and get a taste of that that adventure kind of feel. And then when they're done with the Versys 300, they can sell it to some other new rider, and they can just graduate straight up to the Versys 650 because it's a part of the same motorcycle model family. There's going to be a lot of familiarity to them. It's going to feel a lot more powerful, so they're going to feel like they're really getting a lot of bang for their buck by upgrading. I know people who probably right now would buy a Versys 650 if it had an adventure model. I think there's a lot of good that can come for Kawasaki by making an adventure version of a bike that they already sell. And also, you know, it would minimize the R&D. You know, if they've already got the chassis, they've already got the, you know, the frame and everything, there's not really a whole lot that they would have to R&D to make that bike off-road capable. So I think that those are probably the most likely scenarios, is, you know, maybe making a more off-road version of a 300 or 650 versus, or both. But for now, you know, RIP KLR 650. It's been a good run. I'm really happy to have the bike. I'm proud to own it, and you know, for what it is, what it does, how reliable they are. From where I stand right now, I can see myself owning this bike for the rest of my life. I'm really looking forward to see what Kawi does, and it would be neat to see something moving forward that kind of honors the tradition of the KLR, the legacy of the KLR. You know, maybe they don't have to call it a KLR, but just something to kind of remind us that, you know, at one point this bike existed and it was beloved, and, you know, there's a cult following for it, and to see people actually appreciating it and finding a lot of joy riding it and stuff is, you know, it's just awesome. You know, I guess just don't lose heart. You know, I'm bummed about the KLR, but I'm also excited about the possibilities of what it might mean for the future, because I'm sure Kawasaki has something up their sleeve, and I'm hoping that, you know, whatever it is, it's a home run. I'm hoping they knock it out of the park, and you know, who knows, I might be in line to get the first one, so we'll see. But, you know, don't lose faith. Long live Kawi, I guess.